Permanent Ink by Maxine on AO3. Chapter 15. Interlude. Izuku. Izuku felt like he had taken a Detroit smash straight to his chest. The air was punched out of his lungs and something sapped up his spine. He thought, maybe, but it had seemed too impossible to seriously consider. Too much like he was grasping at straws, allowing his own desperate wants and desires to cloud his judgment. There was no actual way Katsuki could be his soulmate. Just because Izuku sort of maybe wanted him to be, that wasn't enough. There was no reason to expect that reveal. Izuku wasn't even sure why it was something he was tenderly longing for, to be honest. It wasn't an attraction thing, though Kachan was undoubtedly attractive in those rare moments when he wasn't scowling or snarling at everything. Admittedly, there had been more and more of those moments lately, but Kachan being good looking wasn't breaking news. Izuku had known him forever, after all, and he had eyes. And he'd grown up admiring spandex wearing heroes of all genders without coming to some sort of realization about himself. None of that meant he had been harboring some kind of secret crush on the other boy for the last decade. Well, what he couldn't deny was that he'd always wanted to have Kachan by his side, in some way, shape, or form. He wanted his friend back. He wanted Kachan to want him. He wanted them to be close. Being soulmates was maybe a little closer than he anticipated, but apparently he's gotten his wish, huh? Oh, you want Kachan back in your life? Cool, no problem. Now you're tied to him forever. Thanks, universe. Honestly, it was Kachan's fault the idea had even crossed his mind. He'd just been acting so weird for the past few weeks. Past few months, really, ever since his birthday. Ever since he got in his words. Not knowing what Kachan's words were actually torture. Sometimes he thought the curiosity burning inside him was legitimately going to cause his entire body to go up in flames. That there were others who knew was even more infuriating. Great, Kirishima was on it. Wonderful. Kaminari was also aware. Kaminari. That was what intensely tipped off Izuku. Everything about the whole situation. It made his gut churn with all sorts of complicated feelings. To know that Kaminari had somehow managed to be Kachan's first whatever the heck they were calling themselves, and the timing of it all, when it all started, when it ended, Kachan's own instance that it wasn't serious, and how determined he'd been to make Izuku understand that, he was probably never going to be able to get the image of Kaminari kissing Kachan's cheek out of his head. The way Kachan had gone just the slightest pink afterwards, his eyes widening almost inceptively while he tried to play it cool. All of it was permanently burned into Izuku's brain for some reason. He couldn't analyze too closely. They honestly had looked cute together. More than that, they've been good together. Kachan somehow seemed more open after that, the whole experience, more willing to talk about things he would have considered utterly pointless before, more willing to talk to Izuku at all. He finally relaxed his guard a bit, letting Katsuki press up against him all the time without seeming to realize. His hands had found their way to Kaminari too, a touch on the shoulder, absently reaching for his arm, sometimes even plucking at his shirt near his waist to draw him in closer when he wanted them to say something. Izuku had maybe spent an inordinate amount of time watching them, but it was frustrating. That's why it was so odd that Kachan had started insisting that they were just messing around, a notion that Izuku could barely wrap his head around. And they had had that conversation on a night where Kachan had organized an entire hangout session with their friends to make Izuku feel better. He had gone out of his way for Izuku, while at the same time denying how Kaminari was, and everything about that was confusing. Despite that, though, Izuku had generally latched onto it all. Kachan was inviting him to his bedroom. They've played video games all night long like it was something they've never stopped doing when they were kids, and late in the evening, when it was just the two of them still awake, they actually managed to talk to each other again. Not all that long ago, he'd been happy wherever they could manage to have a halfway normal conversation, much less than this. But somehow now it wasn't enough. He wanted more. He wanted everything Kachan was willing to give him, without even knowing what exactly that might entail. Except when Kachan broke up with Kaminari and probably went into zombie mode for 2 weeks, Izuku found himself wondering just how not into Kaminari he actually was. At first, it had really seemed like he was more upset than he was letting on about calling things off with him, which is fine, totally fine. Izuku was ready to wholeheartedly support them if they ever got back together. But it wasn't like that at all. It was Izuku he was acting weird around. Kachan kept daring glares his way. He tensed up if they ran into each other, and seemed oddly flustered whenever Izuku said anything to him. He was irritating and restless in class, and stopped hanging out with anyone else when they were back in the dorms. His friends didn't look the least bit concerned, though. It was like they knew something. They, knew this would all pass soon enough and things would be okay. At some point, Izuku realized it wasn't that Kachan's nervousness and energy was the result of the breakup they were going further and faster away from, but Izuku's birthday that they were getting closer and closer to. The first time he thought as much, he immediately buffled himself. That was an outrageous idea, right? How full of himself was he? Then he started connecting things together. Kachan's complete flip from not even noticing people around him were dating to throwing himself into a relationship so soon after getting his soulmate words. He refused to share what his words were with anyone, which maybe in itself wasn't that surprising, but at least for others, people did know, and there couldn't be much of a reason to keep the word secret unless he thought someone else might recognize them. The effort he put into his interactions with Izuku, how nice he was after Izuku broke up with Uraraka, actually nice. Kachan, nice. He made them all dinner that night. He sent his friends out to buy strawberry ice cream. They halted over the treasuring game system, which, according to Kirishima, was a rare event for their group. They've done all that to cheer Izuku up, which was a concept so mind blowing that Izuku had hardly comprehended it. He lied about the truth of his involvement with Kaminari. Izuku still wasn't sold on the supposed casualness of their relationship, but that wasn't the important thing. The real question was, if Kachan was so determined that they weren't dating, then why had he told Izuku they were? What the hell was the goal there? Kachan said Kaminari told Jiro about them to make her jealous. Why was Kachan trying to make him jealous? Did he want Izuku to be interested in him? Why on earth would he want that? He wanted the exact opposite for that nearly their entire lives. What the heck had changed? And then, what else could it possibly be except for that? Of course. That one thing that might be able to rock even Bakugo Katsuki's entire world. His soulmate's words changed everything. Did he actually recognize them? Did he knew who his soulmate was? Was his soulmate Izuku? Go take a swan dive off the roof. Apparently, yes. Izuku was so busy gapping at the words that he appeared on his arm he didn't immediately notice that Kachan hadn't said anything. Then it took another second or two beyond that for him to realize how tight Kachan was suddenly squeezing his wrists. He looked up at him, but Kachan's head was ducked. His eyes were wide and unseeing. His breath was off. Every inhale, a rag gasp, and something cold started to grow in the pit of Izuku's stomach. Kachan? He said slowly. The other boy didn't give in any initial that he heard. Didn't even twitch when Izuku called out to him a second time. He wasn't sure what to do. Kachan seemed shell-shocked, far more than the situation called for it. He had known Izuku was a soulmate, so maybe he hadn't, or he wasn't sure? Had he been wanting Izuku's words as confirmation? Izuku's gaze dropped quickly to his arm again. There was no mistake that the sentence scrawled on his skin. If Kachan had needed solid proof, this was surely it. Izuku remembered the day vividly. How could he not? That was the day All Might had said he could be a hero, had offered him his quirk. It was the day Kachan could have died. It was the day Izuku could have died. It was the day Kachan told him to jump off a roof. He had been smirking when he said it, cruelly amused, without seeming to care or even consider that Izuku might actually take his taunt to heart. There was a pang in Izuku's chest, something sharp and painful, then he immediately tried to blur out of habit. He yanked his arm free from Kachan's grasp and turned so that his words weren't showing, but even that didn't knock Kachan out of his stupor. Izuku wrapped his fingers around his wrist, instead shaking him. Kachan, he said again, and finally his head snapped up. Izuku didn't know what to say, but even if he had something prepared, the expression on Kachan's face would have recoiled him, speechless. He looked completely shattered. Izuku's eyes went wide. What on earth? What was happening? Was he okay? No, obviously not. What a stupid question. He was clearly distraught because he was tethered to Izuku for the rest of his life. Maybe. Except just hours ago he was definitely told Izuku he did know who his soulmate was. Even if he'd been waiting for confirmation, this shouldn't be a surprise. Unless the shock was from what his words actually said? Izuku felt that pang again. Kachan ripped his arm free and was on his feet before he could say anything. There was a rush of movement. Kachan stumbled his way from him, and Izuku reached out again, feeling fabric, abruptly terrified that Kachan was going to shut him out and pretend this never happened, pretend that they weren't anything to each other, that neither of them had anything written on their arms at all. What the hell were Kachan's words? Kachan pressed at the edge of the room. He hoped shot through Izuku, and he instantly hated himself for it. Even as he dared to dream, just for a split second, he knew Kachan wasn't coming back to him. You should cover that up, he said instinctively. His voice was broken. Feeble thump. Izuku's vision blurred, but he forced himself not to let any tears fall. It's not. You don't deserve. He couldn't seem to get anything else out. Just closed his eyes and hurriedly walked away. Izuku was left in a gaze on the couch. It couldn't have been more than just a few minutes since his words had come in, but it felt like it had been years. How could so much change in so little time? What was he supposed to do now? What did that even mean? You deserve what? What did he deserve? What about all of this had messed Kachan so badly? He'd made it back to his room somehow at some point. He honestly couldn't say when. His head hurt. He briefly contemplating finding someone to talk to just so he could sort out his spiraling thoughts, but he couldn't think of who he'd go to, especially at this late of hour. And this was so massively huge, so tied down in baggage of their past. He wasn't sure how he could even start that conversation with anyone. Plus, it would be admitting a lot about Kachan that he might not want other people knowing. Kachan could still be a jerk nowadays, but it wasn't all the same as he had been in junior high. There was a certain kind of intent malice to his past action that might cross a line for their classmates. As much as Izuku didn't hold it against him, he knew other people might not take it so lightly. Particularly his words, now that he thought about it. Maybe that's why Kachan was so upset. Izuku stared at the ceiling for a long, long while. His brain was running wild. He couldn't imagine to pin down any one thought, couldn't examine anything in an even halfway coherent way. He'd been so busy fretting over Kachan's reaction that he wasn't even sure how he felt about the whole thing himself. Wasn't sure how he should feel. More than once he'd nearly found himself rolling out of bed and going somewhere, anywhere. He could just go out for a walk. Or maybe he could dig out one of his notebooks, flip to a new page, start scribbling down anything that would help him sort out this scrambled mess of emotions running through him. He felt like he was going to explode. In the end, he didn't do any of that. He couldn't think of anyone he really wanted to unload his and Kachan's issues onto, and writing it all down would take too long. So he just laid there and tried to find a different solution when really the only obvious answer to any of this was that he would have to confront Kachan. And who knows how long that was gonna go. By the time he finally fell into restless sleep, he found something new well of determination deep inside him. He was almost desperately clinging to it. He wasn't going to let Kachan ignore this. He wasn't going to let him be scared of what was written on Izuku's arms. They would talk. Izuku was going to make sure of it. He wasn't expecting to find Kirishima at his door the following morning, fidgeting anxiously and looking like he hadn't gotten much sleep himself. Oh, Kirishima, hi. Izuku leaned against the dorm frame when he tipped his head to the side a bit. Do you need anything? Kirishima scratched the back of his head for a moment. Well, he said, guess you wouldn't believe I came down here just to say happy birthday, huh? Izuku grinned a little. I would have believed it, but now that you've said it, I know there's something else. His brows drew down. Is everything okay? Yeah, dude, everything's fine. Kirishima paused for a beat, then huffed and rolled his eyes. Mostly, here. He held out something, and Izuku accepted it before realizing exactly what it was. A soulmate patch? He looked at Kirishima, blinking. How did you? Kirishima sighed. Right, so that's from Bakugo. He asked me to bring it to you. Izuku's eyes shut up. Kachan did? Wow, he really didn't want anyone seeing Izuku's words. Maybe some of Izuku's suspicions had been right. Maybe Kachan was worried about what other people would think of him and if they connected the sentence on Izuku's arms to him. Kirishima shifted his weight. Yeah, shit, Midoriya, he fidgeted again. Then, abruptly, whenever nervous energy had been thumbing with him seemed to explode out as he lurched forward and threw his arms around Izuku. What? I'm sorry, Kirishima blurted. He pulled back as he jumped at him. Before Izuku could even manage to do anything with his own arms aside from letting them hover awkwardly in the air at his sides. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to hurtle myself to you. It just. He looked worried. Izuku peered at him for a moment. Then something clicked. Kachan told you, he guessed, and Kirishima nodded miserably. He told us everything, man. Me and Denki just totally went off on us in the middle of the night, and I'm really sorry. Izuku didn't know what to make of that. At least he knew where Kachan had gone, though. He told you everything, like, about my words? He headed. Kirishima nodded again. Your words, the whole day, what he'd been like to you when you were kids. He completely spilled his guts. That's unlike him, Izuku said, trying to picture how such a conversation would even go. He couldn't wrap his head around it. Yeah, but he was upset, Kirishima said. It was rough, and I know it's not my place or anything. I know you guys have your own thing going, but I wanted to. Shit, I don't know. He let out a frustrated sound. I just felt like I should have picked on it. Like, looking back, it seemed so obvious that he wasn't great to you. I knew you guys went to the same school and stuff, and that you've known each other forever, but I didn't realize it was like that. Izuku was still reeling a little. It's fine, he said faintly. He couldn't believe Kachan had told them everything. Hell, he couldn't believe Kachan had even acknowledged it, actually. He seemed pretty content to act like none of it had ever happened. It's okay, you don't have to feel bad about it. Kirishima barked out a harsh laugh, clearly not believing him. That's something we should pick up on, isn't it, though? As heroes, we should be able to recognize the signs of someone who's being bullied. Izuku flinched a little, and Kirishima's eyes went wide. Oh crap, sorry, I didn't mean to. Don't, Izuku said, holding his hands out in front of him. Look, I'm not making an excuse for him, or trying to say it wasn't that bad, but it's nothing you need to get mad at him for. It was a long time ago. I know that, Kirishima said. He stared hard at the floor. I get it. It was a surprise. I didn't realize, and he's one of my best friends, so I don't know how to. Kirishima? Izuku interrupted again. You don't have to apologize for me not knowing about something no one ever told you about. And it's fine to still be friends with him. I'm happy he has friends like you here. You guys are part of the reason he's not like that anymore. You don't have to feel bad about liking him just because he used to be mean to me. Kirishima lifted his head to look at him. His eyes were wet. You sure? He asked weakly, and Izuku nodded. Absolutely. God, yes. Please don't regret befriending him. I don't. Kirishima shook his head and dragged his hand across his cheek. I don't. But you're my friend too, and learning about all that, I just felt like I've been a shitty friend to you. You haven't, Izuku said softly. I mean it when I say it was a long time ago. He stopped after that day, after the sludge villain. It's been different since then. He mentioned that, Kirishima murmured. It doesn't make sense for the rest of it, okay? I know, but that's between us. Kirishima exhaled noisily. Right. I'm sorry. I know. I'm not trying to stick my nose in it. It just really got to me. He groaned a little, rubbing at his eyes. What the heck? I didn't come down here so you could make me feel better. Habit? Izuku said, chuckling. He went quiet for a beat, peering at Kirishima. Can I ask you something? Yeah, man, shoot. You've known the whole time, right? That I was a soulmate? Ah! Kirishima drew his bottom lip between his teeth. Not the whole time. He never actually told me, but Sarah and Daiki figured it out pretty early on and kept it, totally let it slip. Izuku lowered his eyes, messing with one of the buttons on his shirt. He was wearing the short-sleeved version and hadn't put on his school jacket yet, which meant his words were on full display. How how's he taking it? Not well, I guess, if he felt like he needed to give you a complete rundown of our entire lives. He Kirishima paused, going thoughtful. I think he's actually taking it fine. That's is you. He's been working through that for weeks now. The problem is he doesn't think he's like worthy or something. He gestures at Izuku's arm. That was a sledgehammer to the face. It reminded him about everything. Not that he forgot, I guess, but just he's been avoiding thinking about it. Now he can't. Izuku hummed. I'm glad you were there for him. He scared the shit out of me, Kirishima admitted. The way he was acting. That's why I got Denki. I didn't know what to do. Izuku didn't know what that meant exactly. The way he was acting. But he'd seen Kachan get too overwhelmed with his own emotions before. Maybe something like that happened again. What about this morning? I guess you've seen him? Kirishima darted away for a moment. I've seen him. There's not much better. Izuku frowned, feeling the worry start to creep back in. But suddenly, Kirishima was looking at him again. You'll be okay, Midoriya. He's just finally having to deal with the consequences of his action, and it shook him. That's all. But forget that. How are you? Izuku blinked. Me? Yeah, you. Kirishima looked at him so earnest that it made Izuku feel a little flustered. You're the one who didn't know about the soulmate thing, right? So that's probably a shock. Then Bakugo just, he trailed off. Ran away? Izuku offered dryly, and Kirishima sighed. I mean, basically, right? I guess I'm fine, though. Kirishima's eyes narrowed slightly. Are you? Yes. Izuku palmed the back of his neck. It's okay. It's a lot. I don't think it's completely sucked in yet. And I still need to talk to Kachan, but I'm really okay. You sure you're not just saying that? Izuku nodded. I'm sure. I'm fine. Everything's fine. We just need to talk about it. I hope so, Kirishima said. But he had a worried expression on his face. I hope he talks to you. I really hope it works out for you, Midoriya. I mean that. Thank you, Izuku said, somewhat awkward, and Kirishima flushed a little. Uh, anyways, I better go. Serious, dude. I hope you end up having a good birthday. Yeah, me too, Izuku said. Kirishima gave him a strange smile before turning to head down the hall. Izuku watched him go, then looked back at the patch in his hands. He wondered if his friends would ask about it. He wondered if he should tell them. Keeping the mystery alive, huh? Uraraka said as they walked along the path towards the school building. You really not going to tell us? Not right now, Izuku said. I need to sit on it for a while. Do you know who it is? Ida asked. Izuku shook his head. I can't really say. Suspicious, Todoroki murmured, and Sue elbowed him in the side. He doesn't have to tell us if he doesn't want to, she said. Izuku was pathetically grateful to have such a blunt voice of reason in his group. Sue was amazing. Ida looked somewhat embarrassed as he hurriedly adjusted his glasses. Of course he doesn't, but one can't help being curious. It's not a big deal, Izuku tried. It's really not that exciting. I mean, it's kind of a big deal. We're talking about your soulmate after all, Uraraka said, and Izuku felt a little sad about hiding it from her. Only a handful of months ago, he was pretty sure she'd been the one on the first people he told. Things were getting better between them, but he still couldn't imagine talking to her about who his soulmate was. Not when it wasn't her, after she'd been so hopeful it might be. Where'd you get the patch from? Todoroki asked. It was a mugging morning, and Izuku had his jacket draped over his arm as they walked, knowing it would mean everyone would see his words were covered up. But they were bound to find out about it sooner or later. Anyway. Or were you just prepared? Ah, no, Izuku smiled sheepishly. Actually, Kachan gave it to me. Right, Todoroki nodded. His brows furrowed. Because he was there last night. Does Bakugo know what your words say? Ida asked. He gave me the patch because he knows what it's like to get so many questions, Izuku replied, neatly step-siding Ida's question. That's all. You can't blame us for wondering, Uraraka said, bumping into him with her shoulder. I know, I just can't talk about it right now. They let it drop after that, since they made it to the entrance of the school building. When they scrolled into classroom, Kachan wasn't there yet, and he finally did show up, dashing into the room behind Kirishima at the last second. He didn't once look at Izuku's way. His hands were shoved in his pockets, and he had his shoulders hunched up around his ear as he sniffly moved towards his desk and sat down. Izuku felt his stomach sink. He didn't have time to say anything before Aizawa started speaking, so all he could do was wait until lunchtime, which took approximately 200 years to get there. Izuku couldn't focus for the life of him. He just kept staring at the back of Kachan's head, willing him to... He didn't know. It wasn't like he could just turn around in the middle of class. The jerk could have at least acknowledged Izuku, though. Shot him a glance, nodded in his direction, something. By the time their lunch break finally rolled around, Izuku had worked himself into a mere manic state. He was hyper-aware of Kachan's every move, and he felt like he was going to jump out of his own skin. He was anxious to talk to the other boy. He just wanted to get this over with. He wanted to know Kachan wasn't going to ignore him forever, and when Kachan rushed to get out of his seat the second they were dismissed, Izuku straight up panicked. Kachan, he hissed, reaching out to grab him. We need to... Get off of me. Katsuki spat, twisting out his reach, and that all too familiar pain shot through Izuku's chest again. His eyes widened. No, they had to talk. They just needed to talk. But nothing Izuku said got to Kachan to stay put. He seemed desperate to be far away from Izuku as possible. When he looked at Izuku, his gaze was pleading. You can fucking wait a few more hours, he said, his voice rough and somewhat strained. He squeezed his eyes shut. Deku, please. Izuku felt something inside him crumble. He gave up. Fine, he mumbled. His heart felt heavy. Everything felt heavy. He swallowed thickly. I'll wait. Kachan was gone before Izuku could even look his way again. He let out a shallow breath, grippled the materials of his pants at his thighs. His friends were all on the opposite side of the room, waiting for him. Izuku thought about joining them, but that would require actually being able to make his legs work. Standing up somehow seemed like an impossible task. He belatedly noticed that Zero and Jiro were hovering hesitantly beside his desk, having just gotten up from their own. Jiro kept glancing back and forth between Izuku and the doorway. She looked like she wanted to say something, but was holding back for some reason. Zero had his bottom lip pulled between his teeth. Are you okay, Midoriya? Fine, Izuku said shortly. even though he wasn't. He tried to bottle up a smile, but he honestly had no idea what kind of expression he actually managed. Izuku frowned. She opened her mouth, but Izuku abruptly didn't want her whatever she had to say. He didn't want to hear any of them from either of them. He wanted not to be here anymore. He needed to be anywhere else. His legs were suddenly working again, apparently, because he lurched up from his seat and looked around wildly, trying to figure out how he could get out of the classroom without his friends following. Zero had a hand out towards him. The concern so blatantly evident on his face wasn't something Izuku could handle just then, because he knew, didn't he? Kirishima said so much that morning. Zero had known all along, and he probably overheard the entire exchange Izuku and Kachan just had, and he knew Kachan didn't want him. "Yo, Midoriya," said a loud voice, and suddenly Kaminari was there, shoving his way between Zero and Jiro. Both of them winced and looked like they wanted to pull back or apologize on his behalf, but Kaminari was quicker than they were. He just slapped his hand on Izuku's desk and leaned with a bright grin. "Happy birthday, dude!" "Kaminari," Jiro hissed, grabbing his arm. "Really not the time, man," Zero said in a hushed tone. Kaminari just shook Jiro off of him and shoved Zero towards the door. Izuku caught sight of Kirishima waiting to haul him in. "It's always the time," he said, still beaming as he slung an arm around Izuku's shoulder. "Go eat already. I'll buy Midoriya something from the vending machines. It's as cheap-ass gift as all I can afford." "Dude," Zero tried again, but Kirishima forcibly dragged him away, muttering something to him as he did. Jiro gave them an uncertain look, but Kaminari just arched his eyebrows at her, and she finally huffed and backed down, moving to join Yaoyorozu so they could head to the cafeteria. Izuku felt Kaminari relax beside him. "Come on," he said in a low tone. "Walk with me." He started to sheer Izuku out of the classroom before giving Izuku's friends a big wave as they passed them. "I'm borrowing Midoriya for a minute, guys. I'll have him back to you before lunch is over." Whatever the reactions were, Izuku didn't see them. He was too busy staring at the floor, taking deep breaths and trying to keep his emotions under control. Kaminari led them to an empty stairway in the opposite direction of the lunchroom, where he finally let go. "Sorry," he said, folding his arms across his chest. "You look like you needed to get out of there." Izuku shook his head. "No, I appreciate it," he mumbled. I sort of froze. "I saw Katsuki talking to you." "Not talking to me, you mean," Izuku said. He rested heavily back against the wall, then slid down until he hit the ground and pulled his knees in. "Right," Kaminari said. He sat down next to Izuku. "I saw you talking to him then." "Tried to," Izuku drew in a sharp breath. "Failed miserably." "It is the middle of the school day," Izuku frowned. "It's not like I was asking him to stand on his desk and make an announcement in front of everyone." Kaminari was watching him steadily. "I know, but you have plenty of talk to him later. I just wanted him to—" Izuku trailed off. He couldn't think of a way to finish a sentence that didn't seem completely pathetic. "I'm not expecting anything," he tried and said. "I'm not going to force him into anything. I don't even know what I want. But this isn't something we could pretend hasn't happened." "I don't think he wants that." "Well, I don't know that, do I?" Izuku said darkly. "I don't know anything. I have no idea what he's thinking because he won't even look at me." Kaminari sighed a bit. "Just give him some time. He talked to you guys," Izuku blurted out. His arms tightened around his knees. "He told you and Kirishima everything, so he could have one damn conversation with me about how we're fucking soulmates." "Whoa, whoa." Kaminari held his hands up in a patient way. "Chill, Midoriya. It's gonna be okay." "Why is it so hard for him to talk to me?" Izuku continued, like Kaminari hadn't even said anything. He didn't know where this was coming from, or why his chest suddenly felt so tight. His eyes were burning, but he refused to cry. He refused. He wasn't going to cry over this because everything was going to be fine. "We can't do anything but yell at each other. We have to fight first if we want to have any kind of honest communication." But he could just show up at Kirishima's door in the middle of the night and tell you guys everything under the sun. What the hell is wrong with me? Nothing, Kaminari said firmly. He reached out, grasping Izuku's shoulders. "There's nothing wrong with you, dude. This is all on Katsuki. He's trying. I don't know. He's trying. Trust me." I probably know better than anyone how much effort he's been putting into figuring this thing out. I'm not letting him ignore me, Izuku said. His voice was ragged. Not about this. He's not going to ignore you. Kaminari shook Izuku's shoulders a bit, trying to get his attention. Hey, look at me. Izuku finally glanced over at Kaminari, and he gave him a soft smile. You're working yourself up for no reason. I bet you were awake all night thinking about it, huh? Maybe, Izuku mumbled. Take a few deep breaths, Kaminari suggested, and Izuku stared at him doubtfully for a second before doing as told. He closed his eyes, drawing in several long exhales, his chest expanding with it in each time. When he was done, he glanced back at the other boy and found Kaminari nodding at him encouragingly. Good. Okay, now, don't think about it anymore. Izuku probably gasped at him. How am I not supposed to think about it? Kaminari shrugged. Just put it out of your mind. But Izuku's brows furrowed. What if... Nope. I don't want him to... You're not thinking about it. Izuku scowled. I can't just... Yes, you can. Kaminari arched his eyebrows. Midoriya? I promise you, he's going to talk to you about everything. So stop worrying about it. For a moment, Izuku just blinked at him. He tried not to get his hopes up, but Kaminari sounded so sure. Izuku really wanted to believe him. So he decided to let himself. He fell into certainty and let it wash over him. And for the first time since that night before, he felt almost calm. Izuku took another deep breath and then exhaled in a huff, his cheeks rounding about. Okay, so maybe he had been thinking about it too much. It was like his brain had become a swirling vortex of jumbled thoughts, and Izuku had gotten swept up in how insanely overwhelming the whole thing was. You really think so? He asked, quietly. I know so, Kaminari said. He's just not going to do it in the middle of school. Come on, you know him. He'll drag you out somewhere private later. That was true. Maybe Izuku should just prepare himself to be called out in the middle of the night again. You're probably right. He gave Kaminari a somewhat embarrassing look. Sorry to explode to you. Don't worry about it, Kaminari let go of Izuku. When you keep thinking about that same shit over and over, it makes your brain kind of short circuit, especially when there's no easy answer, and the only thing you could do is wait. It means your thoughts are stuck in your head in an endless loop, with no way out. Izuku huffed out a sort of smile. Waiting sucks. I know, man, but the best things are worth waiting for, right? He arched an eyebrow, and Izuku nodded. So they say. I'm sorry he ran out on you, though. It's fine. Izuku paused. Maybe he didn't need to keep insisting it was fine. He sighed. Yeah, that surprised me. I figured he knew already, so I didn't know why he reacted like that. He looked down at where his arms were, where his words were currently covered by both the patch and his uniform jacket. I think I have a better idea now. Kaminari followed his line of sight. He took it really hard, which is kind of a good thing if you think about it. How so? It means he regrets all the shit he did. Izuku winced. I don't know if that's a good thing. What, you rather he didn't? No, Izuku said, shaking his head. But I don't want him to feel guilty every time he looks at me. Kaminari gave him a slow nod. He looked thoughtful. I get that. Think you might have to wait that one, though. It gets better eventually. Izuku groaned a little. Did I mention that waiting sucks? If there's anyone who agrees with you, it's me. Kaminari waved his right arm around a little. If you thought waiting for your soulmate words was torture, try knowing what they are, but not knowing who's going to say them. I could be waiting for years. Ouch, Izuku said, chuckling lightly. You're right, you win. You guys' drama is small beans compared to my situation, Kaminari said, overly self-important. He gave him a dramatic sigh. I'm obviously the only person in the entire world who has ever had to wait to meet their soulmate. Izuku reached out to pat his shoulder in a comprehensive way. Poor you, he agreed, though he was grinning a bit. Kaminari expelled noisily again. I'll power through, somehow. He fell silent for a beat, then glanced at Izuku. Can I give you one more piece of advice? Sure. Try not to make him feel bad for making you wait. I know you wouldn't do it on purpose. he said quickly. Just, he knows he has to talk to you. And I know he wants to. But he's one of the most emotionally constipated guys on the entire fucking planet. So this shit isn't easy for him. I think he just wants to make sure he gets it right. Could have used that advice a couple hours ago, Izuku mumbled. I kind of came on heavy. Nah, you're fine, Kaminari said. Listen, it's totally fair that you wanted answers after he bailed on you. You're not in the wrong either. It was a shitty move on his part, and he knows that. Izuku swallowed. He could feel his eyes trying to well up again and forced his tears back. Thank you for saying that, he whispered. Sure, dude, Kaminari grinned at him. Just gotta be a little more patient. Only a smidget. Do that, and you're golden. I'm like 2,000% sure he's gonna track you down tonight. And what's a few difficult hours in the long run, right? It'll work out. Fingers crossed. You okay now? Izuku hesitated. I'll be fine, he eventually replied. It's crazy, right? I feel crazy. Kaminari shrugged. I don't know. He tipped his head back, looking up at the ceiling. Actually, I think it made a weird amount of sense. Me and Kachan. Yeah, Kaminari looked at him again, lifting an eyebrow. Even with everything he told us. You guys obviously have a connection, and it sounds like you always had. Not sure how many people would try to save a classmate who was an asshole to them. And you've done it more than once with him. Izuku rested his head back against the wall, eyes sliding shut. I wanted to say all heroes would do that, but honestly, I think maybe I'm just insane. Or maybe you knew there was a reason he acted like he did. You saw his past, after all. Maybe, Izuku said softly. Unless it's just blind, stubborn hope. I don't think it is, Kaminari said. Life's a journey, right? Even the Katsuki we got now isn't the same one he's going to end up being. I've only known him for a little over a year, but I can see how much he's changed even in that amount of time. He struggles with how to show he cares, but he's definitely getting better at it. I'm kind of jealous you've been with him since the beginning. You know more about him than anyone else, about how much he's grown. Izuku blinked, his eyes open, turning to Kaminari, a somewhat surprised look. You're jealous of me? I mean, a little, sure. That's funny. The corner of Izuku's mouth tugged upward. I was a little jealous of you. Kaminari gave him a wide, eerie grin. Oh. Izuku felt his face flush. Stop, not like that. You sure? Kaminari grinned, turning into a more leer as he leaned in closer. Why the hell else could you possibly be jealous of? I mean your friendship, Izuku insisted. You and Kirishima and Kachan, it has always been easy like that for us since we were 4. Uh-huh, Kaminari said, rolling his eyes. So you're not jealous at all that I've got to make out with him, like, a lot, and stick my hands under his shirt and shit? Izuku sputtered. No, I've never really thought about him like that. Kaminari bursted out, laughing. Bullshit, he growled. Oh my god. Izuku pressed his hands on his cheeks. The skin beneath his palm were hot. I've tried very, very hard not to think about him like that. That way, he forced out. That would have been a disaster, okay? Not anymore, though, Kaminari pointed out. Izuku shot his head. That's so far away, he said weakly. There's so much else we have to get through first. I don't even know if he wants to feel that way about me. Kirishima snorted loudly. Midoriya, he said, and just gave him a look. Please. Izuku made a strangled noise and shot his feet up. I'm going back to lunch. Fine, fine. You're really all right? Kaminari asked. He was still chuckling as he pushed himself up to stand, too, but the question was genuine. I take it you didn't tell anyone else about everything? I didn't, Izuku said. I wanted to talk to Kachan first. Well, you got me and Kiria, right? If you need to explode on anyone again before you work shit out with Katsuki? Izuku paused. He met Kaminari's eyes with a grateful smile. I appreciate that. Thanks for calming me down. No problem, dude. You definitely good? Kaminari asked again. I'm good, Izuku said. Great. Kaminari slapped him in the back as they exited the stairwell. I've been rooting for you two since I figured out. you know? Ah, thanks. Seriously though, he's a good kisser. You should get on that. Kaminari! I'm just saying. Izuku managed to keep his cool for the rest of the day. His emotions were all still boiling just under the surface. But when Kachan booked it back to the dorms the second class let out, he just took a couple deep breaths before getting up to meet his friends. Kachan was still nowhere to be found when they were hanging out in the common room a little later. He was probably holed up in his room, and Izuku mentally accepted that he might just remain there for the rest of the night. He was starting to sound like a broken record, even to himself, but for the first time he repeated manner of "it's fine, it's fine, it's fine" was actually sincere, now that he was looking at it logically. He knew Kachan wouldn't and couldn't, frankly, avoid him forever. Their lives were intertwined. Maybe he wasn't the best time to discuss things anyway. There were a lot of people around since they were celebrating Izuku's birthday, despite Kaminari's firm belief that Kachan would talk to him tonight. It was entirely possible it might not happen. And if it didn't, it wouldn't be the end of the world. There wasn't a time limit on their soulmate words, after all. There'd still be a tomorrow, and the next day, and the next. Admittedly, concerning Kachan, and trying to force a heart-to-heart talk on him might actually be the worst thing he could do anyways. Even though he had so many things he wanted to say, Izuku wanted to assure him that he wasn't upset over what the words were. He hadn't had time during the afternoon classes to mull it over, and there was no denying that the circumstances around that day were hard to swallow, but it didn't stop him from caring about Kachan back then, and it certainly wasn't going to now. The words themselves didn't even seem that harsh when the rest of the story was taken into account. They might actually be able to play it off as something else entirely. It would probably always be a little difficult for both him and Kachan to separate the words from the events that had led them to being said in the first place, but no one else would have that issue. And besides, they were kind of a reminder. It was like Kaminari had said. Izuku had been there since the beginning. He had seen Kachan at his lowest points, but hopefully, going forward, he'll also be by his side to see him at his absolute best. And nothing was better indicator of how far they've come than what his words said. He liked to think that things would only continue to improve. That had nothing but time. Izuku let himself be distracted by his classmates, talking and laughing with them as Ida, Sue, and Sato prepared dinner. Soon enough, he wasn't even thinking about Kachan anymore, and he had managed to put the inky scrawl on his arm out of his mind as he giggled instead at some silly joke that Todoroki delivered in the most pan tone of all time. So, of course, it was at that moment that Kirishima showed up with Kachan in tow. Izuku looked at him immediately. He couldn't help it. It was like Kachan was a magnet that his eyes were helplessly drawn to. His presence was all-consuming. Even though he didn't stand out on the complete opposite side of the room, something like static energy sparked between Izuku's skin and his stomach did a weird swooping thing. Kachan was holding his gaze this entire time, not looking away. It made his entire body feel warm. He smiled. Whatever happened, whether they talked tonight, tomorrow, in a week, or next month, Izuku knew they were going to make this work. I couldn't record this morning because AO3 was down. It's Monday, by the way. I'm recording this on Monday, right? Which normally would not bug me if AO3... Well, actually, no. It would bug me if AO3 was down, but, like, it wouldn't mess my, schedule for recording. But this time it will, because I need to record for Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Because I will not be able to record, Thursday or Friday, because Thursday is my graduation practice, and Friday is my graduation. So... I might not sleep early today because I'm going to be able, I need to be able to, record to, make sure I have, the ability to upload daily, as I normally would, because I need to upload daily. It's my thing. I will deliver. The grind does not stop. Okay, so I love that we get a little perspective on how Izuku felt during this whole thing. Like, his little spiral isn't because, oh my god, the words is this. It's because Kachan didn't want to talk about it and left him and, stuff like that. Which, yeah, it is a bit sucky, but at the same time, I understand. He needed his time to to process everything, but at the same time, dude, do not just leave him, you know? I don't know who to side with. I like them both right now, so I'm not gonna pick sides. I'm gonna be in the middle ground, you know? Kaminari's pep talk with, like, Izuku, and, like, their little banter friendship kind of thing, the whole teasing and the whole, like, being there for him. I like the mixture of how he could be both teasing, goofy, and serious when it's needed. And oh my god, did I just love that whole scene. Have I mentioned before how much I love this author's, like, dialogue? Because I feel like I haven't mentioned it enough. Like, the dialogue, I wish I was joking. Dialogue is one of the hardest things to get right with writing and stuff, and I just love how this author does it. Chef's kiss. I love it. I'm here for it. Also, I've been noticing that the chapters are getting longer and longer and longer. Like, dude, I remember when these used to be 10 minutes long. Like, this series used to be like a 10-minute long video, you know, and now it became 20 and then 30 and now it's like 50. And it's like, at one point is it going to become 2 hours? I hope not. I really hope not. Although there is a series that I have planned out that is going to probably be 2 hours. It's not a one shot. No, like 2 hours, an hour per episode, like per like chapter. Because every chapter is insanely long, like insanely long. Like, I think those ones, I don't know how the frick I'm gonna do that. I'm still figuring it out. I'm thinking of, like, recording that series before I even post it, like, just pre-recording the whole damn thing, right? And then posting it, right? Because ain't no freaking way I'm gonna be able to do that weekly. Although, maybe I can. You know what? I'll figure it out somehow. Like, I'll figure out how the logistics of that is. I need to record more. Unfortunately, I can't make this as long as I would want to. I wanted to talk about the dialogue and a little more about the whole friendship Izuku and Kaminari have, but unfortunately, you see, there is this dilemma called I need to record. So, as always, make sure to eat, sleep, drink water, take your meds, have a wonderful day or night, join our community server, link is in the description, subscribe to see more of my content, and thank you so much for watching.